I walked into my childhood home expecting Sunday dinner, but found the entire family sitting in a formal circle in the living room. My father held a typed letter. My mother wouldn't make eye contact. My sister Sarah crossed her arms with disgust. My brother Jason shook his head in disappointment. The coffee table had official documents spread across it. My father cleared his throat and announced they'd made a collective family decision. Today wasn't about dinner. Today they were cutting me out of their lives permanently. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen in the doorway, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. This wasn't the warm family gathering I'd expected. This was an ambush. "What do you mean cutting me out?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. My father adjusted his glasses and looked down at the papers in his hands. "Philip, we've been discussing your situation for quite some time now. We've reached a unanimous decision." The phrase "discussing your situation" sent a chill through me. I noticed how they all avoided my eyes, how they sat with perfect posture like they were in a courtroom. Even the furniture had been rearranged to create this formal semicircle facing the empty chair that was obviously meant for me. I thought back to the past few months and suddenly everything started making sense in the worst possible way. The hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when I walked into rooms during family gatherings. The way my mother would quickly change the subject whenever I mentioned my work. The strange looks my siblings exchanged when I talked about my plans. Just 3 weeks ago at my cousin Mark's graduation party, I'd walked into the kitchen and found my parents deep in conversation with my Aunt Linda and Uncle Tom. The moment they saw me, they scattered like I was carrying some contagious disease. My mother had fumbled with her coffee cup. My father suddenly became very interested in the refrigerator magnets, and my aunt started asking me superficial questions about the weather. I should have known something was wrong then. But I'd been so focused on my work, so consumed with my project, that I dismissed these weird moments as coincidences. The truth was, my life had taken a dramatic turn 2 years ago. I'd graduated from UCLA with a computer science degree and had worked at several tech companies for 5 years. I had a solid career as a software engineer at a respected firm in Santa Monica, making $75,000 a year. My family had been proud of me then. They'd bragged to friends and neighbors about their son, the computer engineer. But 2 years ago, I made a decision that changed everything. I quit my stable job to pursue my dream of creating my own application. I'd saved up enough money to live for about 18 months, and I had an idea that I believed could revolutionize how people manage their productivity and workflow. My family's reaction had been mixed at first. My father, a practical man who'd worked at the same insurance company for 32 years, had expressed concern, but said he trusted my judgment. My mother had worried about my financial security, but had tried to be supportive. Sarah, who worked as a marketing director at a cosmetics company, had been skeptical but polite. Jason, who'd recently gotten promoted to assistant manager at Wells Fargo, had made jokes about me becoming a starving artist, but had seemed to think it was just a phase. As the months went by, though, their attitudes had shifted. I'd moved into a smaller apartment to save money and had dedicated myself completely to developing my app. I worked 16-hour days, often forgetting to eat or shower. I stopped going out with friends, stopped dating, stopped participating in family social events unless they were absolutely mandatory. From the outside, I knew how it looked. I appeared unemployed, antisocial, and obsessed with my computer. While Sarah was getting promotions and Jason was buying a new house, I was living like a hermit, surviving on ramen noodles and determination. The contrast became more obvious at every family gathering. Sarah would talk about her successful marketing campaigns and her upcoming trip to Paris with her boyfriend David. Jason would show pictures of his new BMW and discuss his investment portfolio. Meanwhile, I'd sit there in my wrinkled t-shirt talking about coding languages and user interface design while everyone politely nodded and changed the subject as quickly as possible. My parents had started introducing me to people as their son who was between jobs or figuring things out. I'd catch my mother making apologetic faces to neighbors when they asked about my career. At family barbecues, relatives would pat my shoulder and offer to help me find real work or suggest I go back to school for an MBA. The breaking point had probably been my cousin Jennifer's wedding 2 months ago. While everyone else was dressed in expensive suits and cocktail dresses, I'd shown up in my best clean clothes, which still looked shabby compared to everyone else's designer outfits. I tried to explain my app concept to my Uncle Paul, who owned a successful accounting firm, but he'd looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language and had suggested I consider getting a job at his company filing paperwork. That night, I'd overheard my parents talking in hushed tones in the hotel hallway. My mother had been crying, saying she was worried about Philip's mental state and wondering if I needed professional help. My father had responded that maybe it was time for some tough love to help me see reality. Now, standing in this living room that felt more like a tribunal than a family gathering, I realized those conversations had been building up to this moment. "How long have you been discussing my situation?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair and glanced at my father. "Philip, we're just concerned about your future. You're 28 years old, and you've been unemployed for 2 years. You barely leave your apartment. You don't socialize. You've become obsessed with this computer thing that doesn't seem to be going anywhere." "It's not just unemployed," Sarah interjected, her voice sharp with frustration. "You're completely disconnected from reality. Do you know how embarrassing it is when my colleagues ask about my family, and I have to explain that my brother is a 28-year-old shut-in who lives like a teenager in his parents' basement?" "I don't live in anyone's basement," I said defensively. "I have my own apartment." "A studio apartment in a building with broken elevators," Jason added. "I've been trying to help you network, trying to get you interviews at my bank, but you won't even consider it. You act like having a steady job is beneath you." The hurt in their voices was real, and it cut deeper than their anger would have. They weren't just disappointed in me, they were ashamed of me. I could see it in the way they held themselves, in the careful way they spoke, in the documents spread across the coffee table like evidence in a criminal trial. "The meetings we've been having about you since March," my mother said, then caught herself. She'd meant to say something else, but those words slipped out. "Meetings." I stared at her. "You've been having meetings about me?" The room went silent. Sarah and Jason exchanged glances. My father cleared his throat again and straightened his tie, a nervous habit I'd known since childhood. "Philip," he said carefully, "we've been discussing how best to handle this situation. We've consulted with family members, and we've all agreed that enabling your current lifestyle isn't helping anyone." The word enabling hit me like a slap. They talked about me like I was an addict or a criminal. And the phrase family members meant this went beyond just the 4 of them. This was bigger than I'd imagined. "Who exactly have you been consulting with?" I demanded. I could see my mother struggling with how to answer. Finally, she sighed and said, "Your aunts and uncles are concerned. Your cousins have noticed your behavior at family events. Even your grandfather has expressed worry about your direction in life." My grandfather, the man who'd always been my biggest supporter, who'd taught me to fish and helped me with my science fair projects, who'd told me I could accomplish anything I set my mind to. Even he had lost faith in me. The room felt like it was spinning. These people who'd loved me, supported me, believed in me. My entire life had been meeting in secret for months, discussing my failures, planning my intervention like I was some kind of lost cause. And the worst part was that from their perspective, they were probably right. My father unfolded the typed letter with the careful precision of someone delivering a legal verdict. I noticed his hands were slightly shaking, which told me this was as difficult for him as it was devastating for me. Philip James Richardson. He began formally using my full name like I was in trouble as a child. "We, your family, have prepared this statement to address your current life situation and our collective response to it." The formal tone made everything feel surreal. This was my father who taught me to ride a bike and had cheered at my high school graduation, now reading from a document about my failures like a judge delivering a sentence. For the past 24 months, you have been unemployed, living off savings from a job you voluntarily terminated. Despite having a valuable education and proven work experience, you have rejected multiple opportunities for stable employment. You spend your days isolated in your apartment working on a computer project that has produced no visible income, no demonstrable progress, and no realistic timeline for completion. Each word felt like a punch to the gut. They'd clearly spent time crafting this statement, documenting my failures with the thoroughness of a performance review. Your behavior has become increasingly antisocial. My mother continued reading from her own sheet of paper. You rarely participate in family gatherings. When you do attend, you appear unkempt and discuss topics that make other family members uncomfortable. You've declined social invitations, avoided networking opportunities, and shown no interest in maintaining relationships outside of your immediate family. I wanted to interrupt to defend myself, to explain that I'd been working towards something bigger than they could understand. But the formal nature of this intervention made it clear that this wasn't a discussion. This was a pronouncement. Sarah picked up the next section. Your lifestyle has become a source of embarrassment for our family. At social and professional events, we're forced to make excuses for your behavior and appearance. Relatives and family friends have expressed concern about your mental health and questioned whether you need professional intervention. The word embarrassment stung more than anything else they'd said. I thought about all the family photos from the past 2 years where I'd been cropped out or positioned at the edge of the group. I remembered the forced smiles when relatives asked about my career, the quick subject changes when someone mentioned my name. Jason took over for the next part. We've attempted to help you through encouragement, job referrals, financial advice, and emotional support. You've rejected or ignored all of our efforts. We've concluded that continuing to enable your current lifestyle is preventing you from accepting responsibility for your future. Enable. I finally found my voice. You think supporting your family member is enabling? My father held up his hand to stop me. Philip, let us finish. Then you can respond. He returned to his letter. Therefore, we've made the following decision. You have 30 days to secure stable full-time employment with a reputable company. This employment must provide health insurance, retirement benefits, and a salary of at least $50,000 annually. You must also demonstrate a commitment to maintaining professional appearance standards and participating in family social obligations. The specificity of their demands was almost absurd. They'd created a checklist for my life like I was a teenager who'd been caught skipping school. If you fail to meet these requirements within 30 days, my mother continued, you will be permanently removed from our family. This includes removal from our will, removal from all legal documents, listing you as an emergency contact or beneficiary, and termination of all family communication and support. I stared at them in shock. You're giving me an ultimatum to choose between my dreams and my family. Dreams. Sarah's voice was sharp with disbelief. Philip, you're 28 years old living like a college student. These aren't dreams. This is avoidance of responsibility. My father pulled out a folder of official-looking documents. These papers have already been drawn up by our attorney. Your name has been removed from the family trust, the life insurance policies, and the business partnership agreement for your grandfather's property investments. The business partnership. I'd completely forgotten about that. When I'd turned 25, my grandfather had included me in his small real estate investment portfolio, which generated a few $1,000s annually for each family member. It wasn't a fortune, but it had been a symbol of being considered a full adult in the family. We've also drafted a public statement. Jason added, pulling out another sheet of paper. Explaining to extended family members why we're taking this action. This statement has been reviewed by everyone in the family. and they're all in agreement with our decision. A public statement, the words came out as a whisper. My mother's voice was barely audible as she said, "Philip, we've already spoken with your aunts and uncles, your cousins, and your grandfather. We've explained the situation and our planned response. They all agree that tough love is necessary at this point." The room started spinning. Not only were they disowning me, but they'd already told everyone. This wasn't a threat or a warning, it was a formal notification of something that had already happened. "You told everyone," I could barely form the words, "before even talking to me. We've been trying to talk to you for 2 years, Sarah said defensively. Every conversation ends with you making excuses or promising that your app will be successful soon. We decided that action was more effective than more empty discussions. My father reached for another document. This letter has already been sent to your cousin Mark, your cousin Jennifer, your Aunt Linda, your Uncle Tom, your Uncle Paul, your Aunt Susan, and your grandfather. It explains our position and requests their support in maintaining boundaries until you demonstrate a commitment to responsible adult behavior." I felt like I was falling through the floor. My entire extended family had received a letter explaining why I was being disowned. Everyone I'd grown up with, every family gathering I'd ever attended, every person who'd been part of my life since childhood, now knew that my immediate family considered me such a failure that they'd formally expelled me. "What did you tell them exactly?" I managed to ask. Jason read from his copy. "We are writing to inform you that Philip Richardson is no longer considered a member of our immediate family unit. After extensive efforts to help him establish a stable, responsible lifestyle, we've determined that continued support would be detrimental to his personal growth. We ask that you respect our decision by not providing him with financial assistance or housing, as this would undermine our efforts to motivate necessary life changes." The clinical language made it sound like I'd committed some kind of crime. They'd written about me like I was a dangerous person that the family needed protection from. "We've also changed our emergency contacts at work and with our doctors," my mother added quietly. "And we've informed your grandfather that you're no longer authorized to visit his house or participate in family meetings about the property investments." My grandfather's house. The place where I'd spent every summer as a child, where I'd learned to fix cars and build furniture, where I'd felt most accepted and understood. They'd even taken that away from me. "This is insane," I said, my voice rising. "You're disowning me because I'm following my dreams instead of living the life you want me to live. We're disowning you because you've become a burden and an embarrassment," Sarah said bluntly. "Because you're 28 years old with no income, no prospects, no social life, and no realistic plan for your future. Because we're tired of making excuses for you and pretending that what you're doing is normal or healthy." My father folded the papers and placed them back in the folder. "Philip, we love you, but we can't continue to watch you waste your life and drag our family down with you." This decision wasn't made lightly, but it was made unanimously. The word unanimously was the final blow. Every person who'd raised me, supported me, and claimed to love me had voted to remove me from their lives. I looked around the room one more time, taking in their faces. My mother was crying, but trying to hide it. My father looked stern, but sad. Sarah appeared resolute and slightly angry. Jason seemed uncomfortable, but determined. These were the people who'd been at my bedside when I'd had pneumonia as a child, who'd celebrated my college graduation, who'd given me advice about my first job, who'd been the foundation of everything I'd thought I could count on in life. And now they were strangers sitting in judgment of my choices, having already told our entire extended family that I was dead to them. Without saying another word, I turned around and walked out of the house I'd grown up in, knowing I would never be welcome there again. I drove aimlessly through the suburban streets of my childhood, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles were white. Every familiar landmark felt like a mockery now. The park where we'd had family picnics, the school where my parents had proudly attended my graduation, the grocery store where my mother had introduced me to her friends as her brilliant computer engineer son. All of those memories belonged to someone else now, someone who'd had a family. I pulled into the parking lot of Mel's Diner, a place where we'd celebrated every birthday, every good report card, every small victory of my childhood. The red vinyl booths and checkered floor had been the backdrop for countless family conversations about my future, my potential, my dreams. Now I sat alone in a corner booth staring at a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. The waitress, a woman named Carol, who'd been working there for 15 years, recognized me and asked where the rest of the family was. I couldn't find words to explain that there was no family anymore. The weight of what had just happened started to sink in. It wasn't just the immediate family who'd rejected me. They'd systematically contacted every person who'd ever been part of my support system and convinced them that I was a lost cause worthy of abandonment. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. My cousin Mark, who I'd grown up with like a brother, had probably received that letter yesterday. My Aunt Linda, who'd always slipped me $20 bills at family gatherings, now knew I was officially considered a failure. My grandfather, the man who'd taught me that persistence and hard work could overcome any obstacle, had been convinced that I was no longer worth his time or attention. The social media aspect hit me like another wave of nausea. My family members were all connected to each other on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. They'd probably posted subtle messages about difficult family decisions and tough love, and everyone would know exactly what they meant. I checked my Facebook notifications and found nothing. No missed calls, no text messages, no emails. The silence was deafening. Usually, after any family gathering, there would be follow-up messages, photos shared, plans made for next time. Today, there was nothing but a void where my family used to be. My mind drifted back to Christmas morning 2 years ago, before I'd quit my job, before I'd started my app project. We'd all been gathered around my parents' tree, laughing as we opened presents. My mother had given me a framed photo of our family from my college graduation, and she'd written on the back, "So proud of the man you've become." That photo was probably in a trash can somewhere now. I drove to Riverside Park, where my father had taught me to throw a football, where my brother and I had built elaborate sand castles, where my sister and I had fed ducks from the wooden bridge. I sat on a bench facing the pond and tried to process the magnitude of what I'd lost. It wasn't just the emotional support. My family had been my safety net, my emergency contacts, my references for apartments and loans. They'd been the people I could call if my car broke down or if I needed help moving furniture. They'd been the constants in my life, the people who knew my history and my inside jokes and my favorite foods. Now I was truly alone in a way I'd never experienced. At 28 years old, I was starting over with no family connections, no professional network through them, no invitation to gatherings or holidays or celebrations. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Amanda, my ex-girlfriend, who I dated for 3 years before breaking up 18 months ago. We'd ended things amicably when I decided to pursue my app development full-time, and she'd wanted someone with more stability and conventional career goals. "Philip," her voice was hesitant, "I just got the strangest call from your sister, Sarah." My stomach dropped. "What kind of call?" "She wanted to talk to me about your, quote, mental health situation. She asked me if I'd noticed any concerning behavior patterns when we were dating. She seemed to think you might need professional help." The betrayal kept getting deeper. Not only had they disowned me, but they were now reaching out to my ex-girlfriend to build a case that I was mentally unstable. "What did you tell her?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Amanda was quiet for a moment. "Philip, I have to be honest. I told her that I'd been worried about you for a while. You did become pretty obsessed with that computer project. You stopped socializing, stopped taking care of yourself, stopped participating in normal activities. I thought maybe your family should know that the changes started before we broke up. You've been talking to my family about me." "Not regularly," she said quickly. But Sarah reached out a few months ago asking if I thought you were okay. She said they were concerned but didn't know how to help. I thought I was being helpful by sharing my observations. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the park bench. Even my ex-girlfriend had been part of the secret network monitoring my behavior and finding me lacking. Amanda, did you tell them anything else? I mentioned that you seem to have lost touch with reality about your app's potential. That you talked about it like it was going to make you millions of dollars, but from the outside, it looked like you were just avoiding getting a real job. I thought they should know that you might need professional guidance to see things more clearly. So not only had my family decided I was a failure, but my ex-girlfriend had been feeding them information that supported their conclusion that I was delusional and possibly mentally ill. They disowned me today, I said quietly. Amanda's voice was shocked. Official documents, family meeting letters to all the relatives. I'm no longer part of the family. There was a long silence before Amanda said, Philip, I never intended for things to go that far. I thought they were just trying to plan an intervention to help you. An intervention to help me get a normal job and give up on my dreams. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, she said gently. Maybe it's time to consider that this app project isn't working out the way you'd hoped. Maybe your family sees something you can't see. Even Amanda, someone who'd claimed to love me, thought my family was probably right. After we hung up, I sat in the park as the sun began to set, watching families play with their children, couples walking their dogs, groups of friends enjoying picnics. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere, to have people who cared about them, to be part of something bigger than themselves. I'd never felt more alone in my life. But as I sat there feeling sorry for myself, something started to shift inside me. The hurt was still there. The betrayal still burned, but underneath it all, a different emotion was beginning to emerge. Anger. Not the explosive, destructive kind of anger, but the cold, determined kind that comes from being underestimated and dismissed. The kind that makes you want to prove everyone wrong, not just for revenge, but for justice. My family had made their decision based on incomplete information. They judged my worth based on appearances and conventional measures of success. They'd written me off because my timeline didn't match their expectations. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that their timing was spectacularly dramatically wrong. For the first time since walking out of that family intervention, I smiled. They had no idea what was coming. I drove back to my studio apartment in a building they'd described as having broken elevators, though the elevators actually worked fine. My neighbors were young professionals, artists, and graduate students who appreciated the affordable rent and the proximity to downtown Los Angeles. It wasn't prestigious, but it was mine. And it had been the perfect headquarters for the most important project of my life. I climbed the stairs to the third floor and unlocked my apartment door, stepping into the space my family saw as evidence of my failure. One main room with a kitchen area, a bathroom, and a walk-in closet. But what they'd failed to notice during their one brief, judgmental visit was that this small space contained some of the most sophisticated computer equipment money could buy. Two 27-inch monitors dominated one wall connected to a custom-built desktop computer with 64 gigabytes of RAM and the latest graphics processing unit. A professional-grade microphone for recording user feedback sessions. A whiteboard covered with flowcharts and user interface sketches. Shelves lined with programming books, design manuals, and business development guides. This wasn't the apartment of someone avoiding responsibility. This was the workspace of someone building something revolutionary. I sat down in front of my computer and opened the folder labeled Task Flow Development Confidential. Inside were 2 years' worth of code user testing data, market research, and business projections. But most importantly, there were 3 folders I hadn't opened in weeks because I'd been afraid that looking at them would jinx everything. The first folder was labeled Google Acquisition Proposal, Final. The second was labeled Legal Documents, Completed Transaction. The third was labeled Financial Transfer Confirmations. 3 weeks ago, my entire life had changed in a single phone call. I'd been debugging a particularly stubborn piece of code when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I'd almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Philip Richardson. This is David Chen from Google's Strategic Acquisitions team. We need to talk. TaskFlow had started as a simple idea. I'd noticed that most productivity apps forced users to choose between different systems, project management tools, calendar apps, note-taking software communication platforms. But real work doesn't happen in isolated categories. People need to seamlessly move between planning, executing, communicating, and reviewing their work. So I designed an application that integrated with every major business software platform: Microsoft Office, Google Workspace, Slack, Trello, Asana, Salesforce, QuickBooks, and dozens of others. Users could manage their entire workflow from a single intuitive interface that learned their habits and optimized their productivity automatically. The development process had been grueling. I'd taught myself 3 new programming languages, studied user experience design, and conducted hundreds of interviews with professionals across different industries. I'd built the app, tested it, torn it down, and rebuilt it 17 times until it finally worked the way I'd envisioned. The breakthrough had come 6 months ago when I'd released a limited beta version to 50 volunteer testers. Within 2 weeks, they'd invited 300 of their colleagues to join. Within a month, I had 5,000 active users. Within 3 months, TaskFlow had 25,000 regular users and was growing exponentially. That's when Google's artificial intelligence algorithms noticed the pattern. TaskFlow wasn't just another productivity app. It was demonstrating user engagement metrics and workflow efficiency improvements that surpassed anything else in the market. Google's data analysts had identified it as a potential threat to Google Workspace's dominance in the enterprise productivity space. But instead of viewing it as competition, they'd seen it as an acquisition opportunity. David Chen had flown to Los Angeles the day after our phone call. We'd met at a coffee shop near UCLA, and he'd explained that Google wanted to acquire TaskFlow and integrate it into their existing product ecosystem. They were offering $12 million for the acquisition plus a 40% ownership stake in the ongoing development, plus a position as lead developer with a starting salary of $250,000 annually. I nearly fainted in the middle of Starbucks. The legal process had taken 3 weeks. Lawyers, contracts, due diligence, technical reviews. Google's team had been amazed by the sophistication of the code and the thoroughness of my market research. They'd told me that TaskFlow represented exactly the kind of innovative thinking they wanted to promote within their company. The money had been transferred to my accounts yesterday morning. $12 million minus taxes, minus legal fees, minus business expenses. I was worth more money than my parents had earned in their combined lifetimes. But the money wasn't even the best part. The best part was the email I'd received this morning from Google's public relations department asking for my approval on the press release they plan to send to tech industry publications next week. The headline read, "Google acquires TaskFlow, founded by visionary developer Philip Richardson for revolutionary productivity platform." The article described me as a breakthrough innovator whose independent development of integrated workflow solutions represents the future of enterprise productivity. It quoted Google's chief technology officer saying that TaskFlow was exactly the kind of creative thinking that emerges when talented developers are given the freedom to pursue ambitious projects. Next week, TaskFlow would be announced as part of Google Workspace, with my name prominently featured as the founder and lead developer. The tech media would cover the story. Industry publications would analyze the acquisition. LinkedIn would be full of posts about the young entrepreneur who'd built something so impressive that Google had paid millions to acquire it. My family had no idea that while they were planning their intervention to save me from my delusions, I was actually in the final stages of achieving exactly what I'd set out to accomplish. The irony was almost too perfect. I opened my laptop and looked at the press release draft one more time. Google had scheduled the announcement for next Thursday, which was exactly 5 days after my family's 30-day ultimatum deadline. My father had demanded that I get a job paying at least $50,000 annually. Instead, I was about to become Google's newest lead developer, earning 5 times that amount plus equity in a company worth more than $1 trillion. My mother had worried that I was avoiding responsibility and living in a fantasy world. Instead, I'd taken the ultimate responsibility by building something from nothing, and my fantasy was about to become international news. Sarah had been embarrassed to explain my situation to her professional contacts. Soon her colleagues would be asking her how it felt to have a brother who'd sold his company to Google for millions of dollars. Jason had offered to help me get an entry-level job at his bank filing paperwork. Meanwhile, I was about to join a company that was literally reshaping the global economy. They'd told our extended family that I was a burden and an embarrassment who needed to be cut off for his own good. In less than a week, those same relatives would be reading about my success in news articles and social media posts. But the most beautiful part wasn't the vindication or the money or even the recognition. The most beautiful part was that I'd proven something to myself that I'd started to doubt during the darkest moments of the past 2 years. I'd proven that believing in your own vision, even when everyone else thinks you're crazy, can lead to achievements that exceed your wildest dreams. I'd proven that persistence and hard work and refusal to give up can overcome skepticism and criticism and even family rejection. I'd proven that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who understand you the least. And now it was time to prove one more thing. It was time to prove that success is the best revenge, but forgiveness is the highest form of victory. I picked up my phone and started making plans for my father's 65th birthday party, which was scheduled for this Saturday. My family had made their choice about me based on incomplete information. It was time for them to learn the rest of the story. The next morning, I called my attorney Marcus Webb, a sharp Harvard Law graduate who specialized in intellectual property and business acquisitions. I'd hired him 6 months ago when TaskFlow started gaining serious traction, and he'd been instrumental in navigating the Google deal. "Philip," he said when he answered his phone, "congratulations again on the acquisition. I assume you're calling about the press release timeline. Actually, I'm calling about something else. My family has legally removed me from their will and various family documents. I need to know what rights I have, if any." Marcus was quiet for a moment. What exactly did they do? I explained the intervention, the 30-day ultimatum, and the legal documents they'd shown me. Marcus listened without interruption, and I could hear him typing notes on his computer. First, he said when I finished, they can absolutely remove you from their personal wills and life insurance policies. Those are their private decisions. However, if you're referring to your grandfather's real estate investment trust, that's a different matter entirely. What do you mean? If you were added as a beneficiary to an existing trust, when you turn 25, they can't simply remove you without your consent or without violating the terms of the trust. I'd need to see the original documents. But typically, these arrangements are designed to prevent family members from making emotional decisions about other beneficiaries. This was interesting. I'd never paid much attention to the legal details of my grandfather's property investments, but if Marcus was right, my family might have overstepped their authority. "There's something else," Marcus continued. "You mentioned they sent letters to extended family members and made public statements about your situation. Depending on the wording, that could potentially constitute defamation if they made false statements about your character or mental health. They told everyone I was unemployed, antisocial, and possibly mentally unstable. Well, the unemployed part was technically true at the time, even though it was by choice. The antisocial characterization is subjective. But if they made specific claims about mental health issues without factual basis, and if those statements damaged your reputation in measurable ways, you might have legal recourse. I hadn't called Marcus because I wanted to sue my family. I'd called because I wanted to understand my position, but his observations were giving me ideas about how to handle the upcoming confrontation. "Marcus," I want you to prepare a few documents for me. First, I want a complete summary of the Google acquisition deal, including all financial details and future projections. Second, I want a legal analysis of my rights regarding my grandfather's trust. Third, I want documentation of my actual employment status and professional standing. What are you planning, Philip? My father's 65th birthday party is this Saturday. My family is planning to use that event to make a public statement about disowning me. They don't know about the Google deal yet. I want to be prepared with facts. Marcus chuckled. You're going to crash the party with proof of your success. Something like that. But I want to do this right. I don't want to be vindictive or cruel. I want to be professional and factual. I'll have everything ready by Friday afternoon. After hanging up with Marcus, I called Google's public relations department and spoke with Jennifer Walsh, the communications manager, handling the task flow announcement. Philip, we're excited about next Thursday's press release. The tech media is already asking questions about the acquisition, so we expect significant coverage. Jennifer, I have an unusual request. My family doesn't know about the acquisition yet, and I'd like to tell them personally before it becomes public. Is there any way to move the announcement earlier? How much earlier? This Saturday. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. That's pretty short notice, but it's not impossible. We'd need to get approvals from the executive team and accelerate our media outreach. Can you tell me why the timing is important? I explained the family situation in general terms, emphasizing that I wanted them to hear the news directly from me, rather than reading about it online. Actually, Jennifer said, that could make for an even better story. The family that didn't believe in the entrepreneur's vision, only to discover he'd achieved massive success. It's very relatable for our audience. Let me talk to my team and see what we can do. By Thursday afternoon, everything was in motion. Marcus had prepared a comprehensive packet of legal and financial documents. Google had agreed to accelerate the press release to Saturday morning. Jennifer had confirmed that the announcement would go live at 9 a.m. Pacific time, with follow-up coverage throughout the day. I'd also received an unexpected call from my cousin Mark. Philip, I got this weird letter from your parents about you being disowned or something. What the hell is going on? Mark was 31, a mechanical engineer who worked for Boeing, and we'd always gotten along well. He was practical like my father, but more open-minded about unconventional career paths. It's complicated, I told him. Are you going to Dad's birthday party on Saturday? Yeah, the whole family's going to be there, including some people who are pretty confused about this letter. Your Uncle Tom called me yesterday, asking if you'd had some kind of mental breakdown. Mark, can you do me a favor? Don't discuss the letter with anyone else until after Saturday. I'm going to explain everything at the party. You're planning to show up after they've disowned you? Trust me, just save your questions for Saturday. By Friday evening, I'd received the final piece of information I needed. Marcus called to tell me that he'd reviewed my grandfather's trust documents and confirmed that my parents had no legal authority to remove me from the investment partnership. In fact, he said, by removing you from family business decisions without proper legal procedure, they may have violated their own fiduciary duties as trustees. Your grandfather specifically structured this trust to prevent exactly this kind of emotional manipulation. But the most shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. My neighbor Helen Morrison was a retired paralegal who lived in the apartment next to mine. She knocked on my door Friday evening and asked if she could speak with me about something urgent. Philip, I hope you don't mind, but I couldn't help overhearing a phone conversation in the hallway yesterday. A woman was talking very loudly about your family situation. My heart sank. What did you hear? She was telling someone that your parents were planning to make some kind of public announcement at a birthday party about donating your inheritance to charity. She seemed very excited about it, like they were making a statement about family values or something. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. My family wasn't just planning to disown me privately. They were planning to use my father's birthday party in front of our entire extended family to publicly announce that they were donating my inheritance to charity specifically because they disapproved of my lifestyle choices. They were going to turn my father's birthday celebration into a public humiliation ceremony for me using charity donations as a way to demonstrate their moral superiority and ensure that everyone knew exactly how ashamed they were of their son. Helen continued. I'm sorry if I'm overstepping, but the woman said something about making sure everyone understood that the family doesn't support your choices. It sounded pretty harsh. After Helen left, I sat in my apartment thinking about the full scope of what my family had planned. Not only had they disowned me, but they were going to use a family celebration to publicly shame me, making sure that every relative and family friend understood that I was such a disappointment that my parents would rather give my inheritance away than risk anyone thinking they supported my decisions. The cruelty of it was breathtaking, but it also clarified exactly what I needed to do. I wasn't just going to show up with proof of my success. I was going to give them a lesson in humility, judgment, and the danger of making assumptions about people whose dreams you don't understand. Saturday morning was going to be very interesting. Saturday morning arrived with perfect Southern California weather. Sunny skies, gentle breeze, ideal conditions for a backyard birthday celebration. I dressed in my best clothes, a navy blue suit I'd bought for the Google meetings, crisp white shirt, burgundy tie. I wanted to look like the successful professional I'd become, not the disheveled failure my family expected. I arrived at my parents' house at 11:30 a.m. exactly when Google's press release was going live. My timing was deliberate. I wanted the news to break while I was standing in front of everyone so they could see the real-time reactions as the story spread across social media and tech news websites. The backyard was decorated with blue and gold balloons, my father's favorite colors. Tables were set up under the old oak tree where I'd built tree houses as a child. About 25 people were already there, aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, and neighbors who'd known our family for decades. I walked through the side gate and into the backyard, and conversations immediately stopped. People stared at me with a mixture of surprise, confusion, and awkwardness. They'd all received the letter explaining that I'd been disowned, and my appearance at the party clearly wasn't expected. My mother spotted me first. Her face went pale, and she immediately began whispering urgently to my father, who was standing near the barbecue grill wearing a birthday boy apron that Sarah had given him as a joke. My father turned around, saw me, and his expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession. Surprise, anger, confusion, and finally a kind of stern resolve that I remembered from childhood discipline moments. "Philip," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "this is a private family gathering. You weren't invited." "It's your birthday, Dad. I brought you a present." I held up a manila envelope containing the documents Marcus had prepared. Several people moved closer, curious about what was happening. My cousin Mark gave me an encouraging nod from across the yard. "We've already discussed our family situation," my mother said, walking over to stand beside my father. "We asked you not to contact us unless you'd met the conditions we outlined. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about." I opened the envelope and pulled out the first document. "I did get a job. I thought you might want to see the offer letter." My father reluctantly took the paper and began reading. His expression changed as he processed what he was seeing. "This is from Google," he said, sounding confused. "It says lead developer position salary of $250,000 annually plus equity and bonuses." A murmur went through the gathered crowd. Google was a name everyone recognized, and a $250,000 salary was more than most of them had ever imagined earning. "That's right," I said. "I start Monday, but there's more." I handed him the second document, which was the acquisition agreement summary Marcus had prepared. This one took longer for my father to read, and I watched his face as he realized what he was looking at. "This says Google acquired your app for $12 million. The backyard went completely silent. 25 people were staring at us trying to process what they'd just heard. $12.3 million to be precise, I said calmly. Plus ongoing royalties and equity in the integrated product. My sister Sarah pushed forward and grabbed the document from my father's hands. This has to be fake. Philip's been unemployed for 2 years working on some computer project that doesn't make any money. The TaskFlow productivity platform, I said, which now has over 100,000 active users and is being integrated into Google Workspace for global distribution. My uncle Tom, the accountant who'd suggested I consider filing paperwork for his company, stepped closer to look at the documents. "These look legitimate," he said quietly. "The letterhead, the legal language, the signatures. This appears to be real." At that exact moment, my cousin Jennifer's phone buzzed with a notification. Then Mark's phone. Then my Aunt Linda's. Within 30 seconds, half the people at the party were looking at their phones with shocked expressions. "What's happening?" my mother asked. Jennifer held up her phone screen. "Google just announced they acquired TaskFlow. It's trending on Twitter. The founder's name is Philip Richardson." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. My family stood frozen, staring at me like I'd just announced I was from another planet. Extended family members were whispering to each other, looking at their phones, and occasionally glancing at me with expressions of amazement and confusion. "This can't be real," Jason said. "Philip, if this were true, why wouldn't you have told us?" "When exactly should I have told you?" I asked. "During one of the secret family meetings you were having about my failure. Or maybe when you were sending letters to everyone explaining that I was unemployed and potentially mentally unstable." My father was still staring at the acquisition documents. "These papers say the deal closed 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks ago, I repeated, which was 3 days before you staged the intervention to disown me for being an unemployed loser who was embarrassing the family. The irony was finally sinking in for everyone. While my family had been planning their formal rejection of my life choices, I'd already achieved exactly what I'd been working toward. They disowned a multi-millionaire Google employee and thought they were cutting off a failure. My Aunt Susan, who'd always been the most direct person in the family, spoke up from across the yard. "Philip, are you telling us that you've been a millionaire for 3 weeks and didn't mention it?" "I was planning to announce it today, actually. I thought Dad's birthday party would be the perfect time to share good news with the family." I paused and looked around at all the confused faces. But then I got disowned for being a disappointment to the family name. My cousin Mark started laughing. Not mean-spirited laughter, but the kind of amazed laughter that comes from recognizing an absurd situation. Wait. Let me understand this. Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia disowned Philip for being unemployed, and it turns out he just sold his company to Google for $12 million. Hader. And they sent letters to all of us asking us to support their decision because Philip was a burden on the family. Jennifer added, now grinning, as she continued reading her phone. But according to this article, Google's chief technology officer is calling him a visionary developer whose innovative thinking represents the future of enterprise productivity. My father looked like he was about to be sick. "Philip, why didn't you tell us about any of this?" "I tried to tell you about my app for 2 years. You told me it was a waste of time and that I needed to get a real job. I tried to explain my business plan. You said I was living in a fantasy world. I tried to share my excitement about user growth and development milestones. You said I was making excuses for being unemployed." My mother was crying now, but not the manipulative tears from the intervention. These were tears of genuine remorse and shock. "We thought we were helping you," she said quietly. "You thought you were saving me from my delusions," I said. "Instead, you were punishing me for pursuing exactly the kind of innovative thinking that companies like Google value most." My phone started ringing with calls from tech industry journalists who wanted interviews about the acquisition. The story was spreading faster than I'd anticipated, and several major technology publications were already reaching out for quotes and background information. "This is really happening," my brother Jason said, staring at his own phone where he'd apparently found the Google press release. "Philip just became a millionaire tech entrepreneur, and we disowned him last week for being a failure. The gathered family members were now completely focused on their phones, reading articles, sharing links, and posting on social media about the unexpected turn of events. I could hear fragments of conversations as they called and texted other people who weren't at the party. "You're not going to believe what just happened at Robert's birthday party. Remember that letter about Philip being disowned? Well, it turns out he just sold his company to Google." The family failure just became the family success story, and nobody knew. My father handed me back the documents and extended his hand for a handshake. "Philip, I owe you an enormous apology." "We all do," my mother said, stepping forward. "We made a terrible mistake." But I wasn't ready to accept their apologies yet. There was still one more revelation coming. "Actually, there's something else you should know," I said. "I spoke with my attorney about the family trust documents. It turns out you didn't have the legal authority to remove me from Grandpa's real estate investments. That requires unanimous consent from all beneficiaries, including me." My Uncle Tom's eyes widened. "You're saying they illegally removed you from the trust?" "I'm saying they made a decision based on emotions rather than legal procedures, which means the trust distributions that have been made since my removal may need to be audited and corrected." This was getting complicated in ways my family hadn't anticipated. Not only had they wrongly judged my professional situation, but they'd potentially violated legal agreements in their eagerness to punish me. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Walsh at Google. "Philip, the story is huge. CNN wants an interview this afternoon, and TechCrunch is asking for an exclusive about your entrepreneurial journey. Are you available?" I showed the text to my family, driving home the reality that this wasn't just about money or success. This was about recognition, vindication, and national attention for exactly the work they dismissed as worthless. "CNN wants to interview you?" Sarah asked her marketing director instincts, recognizing the significance of major media attention. "About the acquisition, about entrepreneurship, about the importance of believing in innovative ideas, even when others don't understand them." I paused to let that sink in. They're particularly interested in the story of a young entrepreneur who succeeded despite lack of family support. The full implications of what had happened were finally becoming clear to everyone. Not only had my family misjudged my situation, but their rejection of me was about to become part of a national news story about innovation, persistence, and the importance of supporting unconventional dreams. My father sat down heavily in one of the patio chairs, looking like he'd aged several years in the past 20 minutes. "Philip," he said quietly, "how do we fix this?" For the first time since I'd arrived at the party, I smiled genuinely. That, I said, is exactly the right question. The conversation that followed was the most honest my family had ever had with each other. We moved inside to the living room, away from the extended family members who were still processing the shocking turn of events in the backyard. The same room where they'd ambushed me with their intervention had now become the setting for a very different kind of family meeting. My father spoke first. "Philip, I need you to understand something. Everything we did because we love you and we were genuinely worried about your future. From our perspective, you'd thrown away a good career to chase something that looked impossible. I understand your perspective, Dad. But you never tried to understand mine. In 2 years, not once, did any of you ask for a detailed explanation of what I was building or why I believed it would work. You just decided it was impossible and tried to force me to give up." My mother wiped her eyes with a tissue. "We thought we were being responsible parents. We thought tough love would help you see reality. The reality you wanted me to see was your reality. A world where success only comes through conventional careers and traditional paths. You couldn't imagine that someone could build something valuable outside of that system." Sarah, who'd been quiet since reading the Google press release, finally spoke up. "Philip, I owe you a specific apology. I told people at work that you were going through a difficult phase and that the family was concerned about your mental health. I'm going to have to correct those statements now." "What exactly did you tell them?" that you'd become obsessed with a computer project that was clearly going nowhere, and that you needed professional help to accept reality and find normal employment. She paused, looking embarrassed. I also said that our family was considering intervention options because you were refusing to listen to reason. The irony was almost beautiful. While Sarah had been telling her professional contacts that I was delusional and needed mental health intervention, I'd been negotiating with one of the world's largest technology companies about acquiring my revolutionary productivity platform. Jason added, I told the guys at the bank that you were living like a college student and couldn't hold down a job. I offered to help you get interviews for entry-level positions because I thought you needed to start over from the bottom, while I was actually building something that Google valued at $12 million. While you were building something we couldn't see the value of, my father corrected. Philip, that's our failure, not yours. We should have trusted your judgment and supported your vision, even if we didn't understand it. This was progress, but I wasn't finished yet. There's something else we need to discuss. The public statements you made to extended family members and family friends. Those letters you sent out explaining that I was being disowned for my failures. My mother looked stricken. Philip, we sent those letters to 12 family members and 6 family friends. We explained that you were unemployed by choice, that you were refusing help, and that we were implementing tough love to motivate you to make better decisions. And now all of those people are reading news articles about my success. They're seeing CNN interviews and TechCrunch features about the innovative entrepreneur you'd publicly rejected. The full scope of their public humiliation was sinking in. They hadn't just misjudged me privately, they'd made their misjudgment a public statement about their family values and their definition of success. We'll contact everyone and apologize, my father said. We'll explain that we were wrong and that we're proud of what you've accomplished. That's a start, but I want something more than apologies. They looked at me nervously, probably expecting demands for money or revenge. I want you to help me build something that will prevent other families from making the same mistake you made. I pulled out my phone and showed them a document I'd been working on since the Google deal had been finalized. The Richardson Foundation for Entrepreneurial Dreams. I read aloud. A nonprofit organization that provides financial and emotional support for young entrepreneurs whose families don't understand or support their innovative projects. I explained my vision. Young people with breakthrough ideas, but no family support, would receive grants, mentoring, and access to professional networks that could help them develop their concepts. The foundation would also provide family counseling and education to help parents understand the changing nature of work and success in the 21st century. I'm committing $2 million from the Google acquisition to start this foundation, but I want the whole family involved. I want you to volunteer to learn about innovation and entrepreneurship to become advocates for supporting unconventional dreams. My parents exchanged glances, and I could see them processing the magnitude of what I was proposing. You want us to help other families avoid making the mistake we made with you? My mother said slowly. I want us to turn our family crisis into something that helps other people. I want your misjudgment of my potential to become a learning experience that benefits entrepreneurs who face similar family rejection. The conversation continued for another 2 hours. We talked about the pain I'd experienced, the doubt they'd suffered, and the assumptions that had driven us all to this point. They agreed to participate in family counseling sessions to understand how to better support unconventional career paths. They committed to volunteering with the foundation and learning about the startup ecosystem that they'd previously dismissed as impractical. Most importantly, they agreed to a public apology and correction that would be as visible as their original statements of disownment. 1 year later, I stood in the same backyard for my father's 66th birthday party. The foundation had become one of the most successful entrepreneurial support organizations in Southern California. We'd funded 43 young innovators, provided family education to over 300 families, and helped prevent dozens of family rifts like the one we'd experienced. TaskFlow had grown to serve over 10 million users worldwide and had become a standard component of Google Workspace. My role as lead developer had evolved into director of innovation, and I was leading a team of 27 engineers working on the next generation of productivity tools. But the most meaningful change was in my family relationships. My parents had become passionate advocates for supporting young entrepreneurs. My father had joined the foundation's board of directors and had become an expert on the early stages of startup development. My mother had started a support group for parents struggling to understand their children's unconventional career choices. Sarah had leveraged her marketing expertise to help the foundation develop communication strategies that helped families bridge generational gaps about work and success. Jason had provided financial planning services for young entrepreneurs and had learned to appreciate the economic potential of innovative thinking. My extended family had become some of the foundation's biggest supporters. My Uncle Tom had started mentoring young entrepreneurs with accounting and business structure guidance. My cousin Mark had helped several foundation recipients develop their technical prototypes. Even my grandfather had become involved sharing stories about entrepreneurship and risk-taking from his generation. The foundation had received national attention as a model for supporting innovation at the family level. We'd been featured in Harvard Business Review Fast Company and Entrepreneur magazine as an example of how personal, family experiences could be transformed into broader social impact. But the most important lesson hadn't been about entrepreneurship or family dynamics or even forgiveness. The most important lesson had been about the courage to pursue your vision even when the people closest to you cannot see its value. Success isn't just about achieving your goals. It's about maintaining your integrity and staying true to your principles, even when doing so requires you to stand alone. It's about understanding that other people's limitations in imagination or vision don't define the boundaries of what's possible for you. Family love means supporting each other's dreams, not demanding conformity to narrow definitions of acceptable success. True support means believing in someone's potential, even when you don't understand their methods. It means trusting that the people you care about are capable of achieving things you might not be able to envision. Most importantly, forgiveness and growth can transform even the deepest wounds into sources of strength and wisdom. The family crisis that nearly destroyed our relationships had become the foundation for helping hundreds of other families build stronger, more supportive bonds. My father raised his glass for a birthday toast, and I saw tears in his eyes as he spoke. 12 months ago, I stood in this same backyard and made the biggest mistake of my parenting life. I rejected my son's dreams because I couldn't understand his vision. Today, I want to celebrate not just my birthday, but the lesson Philip taught our entire family about the importance of supporting each other's authentic paths to success. He turned to face me directly. Philip, you've shown us that true success comes from believing in yourself even when others don't, from persistence, even when the path seems impossible, and from forgiveness even when you've been deeply hurt. Thank you for not giving up on us even when we gave up on you. As I looked around the backyard at my family, the foundation volunteers, the young entrepreneurs we were mentoring, and the relatives who'd learned to support unconventional dreams, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't the Google acquisition or the financial success or even the public recognition. The greatest victory was standing here surrounded by people who now understood that supporting someone's dreams is the highest form of love, and that believing in impossible things is often the first step toward making them possible. That's a lesson worth sharing, worth celebrating, and worth building a life around. What dreams are you pursuing that others might not understand? Have you experienced doubt from family members about your unconventional path? How did you find the courage to continue believing in your vision, even when others couldn't see it? Share your story in the comments below, and let's build a community of dreamers supporting dreamers. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more inspiring tales about turning setbacks into comebacks. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their dreams are valid, even if others don't understand them yet. Remember that your biggest breakthroughs often come just before others thought you were about to give up. Keep believing, keep building, and keep dreaming bigger than anyone thinks is possible. Thank you for listening, and may your own impossible dreams become tomorrow's incredible realities.